Did you know that Texas's King Ranch was once home to nearly 100,000 head of cattle? Larger than Rhode Island, it didn't just raise cattle, it reshaped the entire American beef industry. It pioneered barbed wire fencing, drilled its own water supply, and introduced scientific cattle breeding. It created the Santa Gertrudis, the first official U.S. beef breed, heat-tolerant, resilient, and exported worldwide. Its vaqueros, the caneños, became the blueprint for the American cowboy. Its innovations in genetics, land use, and sustainability still guide ranching today. So how did one 1853 cattle camp become the model for modern beef production? This is the story of King Ranch and how it changed American beef forever. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to Digital Papyrus for more documentaries on ranches, cattle, and cowboy legacy. King Ranch began on the desolate Wild Horse Desert of South Texas, where water was scarce and lawlessness ruled. Richard King's vision and grit allowed the ranch to expand rapidly despite these challenges. By the late 1860s, the ranch encompassed roughly 150,000 acres and ran thousands of Texas Longhorn cattle, all branded with King's famous Running W brand. This brand would become mythic in Western lore, symbolizing the taming of the Texas frontier. Getting cattle to market was a monumental task in those days, but King Ranch was at the forefront of the great cattle drives. Between 1869 and 1884, over 100,000 head of King Ranch cattle were trailed north to railheads in Kansas and Missouri, helping to stock the growing western ranches and Midwestern stockyards. These epic trail drives, managed by skilled vaqueros on horseback, linked Texas beef with national markets and cemented King Ranch's status as a birthplace of the American ranching industry. One of King Ranch's most enduring contributions to beef cattle was the creation of the Santa Gertrudis breed. In the early 20th century, under ranch manager Robert J. Kleberg Jr., the ranch embarked on an ambitious breeding program to improve their cattle's quality and adaptability. By crossbreeding Indian Brahman bulls with British shorthorn cows, King Ranch produced a new breed that combined the Brahman's heat tolerance with the shorthorn's beefiness. In 1940, the Santa Gertrudis became the first officially recognized beef cattle breed ever developed in the United States. This cherry red breed proved exceptionally hardy in arid, hot climates while still yielding high-quality beef, making it a revolutionary addition to the beef industry. Santa Gertrudis cattle were soon in demand around the world. Today, they remain prevalent in places like Australia and have contributed to the development of other modern breeds for tropical climates. By pioneering scientific breeding and upbreeding, King Ranch set a precedent for genetic innovation in ranching that would be emulated by cattle producers globally. King Ranch didn't just grow bigger than its contemporaries, it also grew smarter, introducing practices that would transform cattle ranching from a hardscrabble open-range pursuit into a modern, efficient industry. In the late 1800s, manager Robert Kleberg Sr. took bold steps to modernize the vast ranch. He built miles of barbed wire fences, subdividing the open range into managed pastures and ending the era of unbounded grazing. This was a game changer. Fencing not only protected King Ranch's herds from outside rustlers, but also let the ranch control breeding and grazing patterns in ways that were impossible on the open range. Kleberg also tackled South Texas's brutal droughts by drilling deep artesian wells, striking a reliable water source in 1899 that kept cattle watered through dry years. With abundant water and fenced pastures, the ranch could sustain large herds and improve its rangeland. At the same time, King Ranch aggressively replaced the scrappy Longhorns with imported Shorthorn and Hereford bulls, ushering in more productive British beef genetics. The legendary Texas Longhorn, valued in the trail drive era for its endurance, quickly gave way to heavier, better fattening breeds once railroads and fencing made long treks unnecessary. The result was higher beef yields and a preview of the selective breeding that defines the industry today. No problem was too tough for King Ranch to tackle, Crews were assigned to clear invasive mesquite brush that choked the grasslands, and horseback riders, Los Caneños, King's skilled cowboys, patrolled the huge ranch to manage cattle and capture wild mustangs that competed for forage. By the early 20th century, King Ranch had introduced innovations like improved corrals, supplementary feeding, mineral supplements, and even mechanized brush control to maximize ranch productivity. These practices, novel in their time, would become standard techniques in ranch management. In short, King Ranch evolved the cowboy's craft into a more scientific, technology-assisted enterprise without losing the horsemanship and grit at its core. King Ranch today, adapting and thriving in a changing industry. Over 170 years since its founding, King Ranch remains a titan of American ranching. But it hasn't stood still. Today, the ranch spans about 825,000 acres and runs some 60,000 head of cattle, still under the iconic Running W brand. It is remarkable that this ranch, which started before the Civil War, is not a relic, but a modern agribusiness conglomerate. King Ranch, Inc. has diversified far beyond cattle. It is the nation's largest citrus producer, operates farms, growing crops like cotton and turf grass, manages commercial hunting leases, breeds elite quarter horses, and even has its own line of leather goods and Western wear. Revenues also come from oil and gas operations, a legacy of the 1930s when oil was discovered on ranch lands, rescuing King Ranch from the brink of debt during the Great Depression. Despite this diversification, cattle ranching remains at the heart of King Ranch's identity. The ranch continues to be a leader in cattle breeding and genetics, maintaining purebred Santa Gertrudis herds and developing new lines to meet modern demands. In recent years, King Ranch worked with industry partners to create the American Red breed, a composite of Santa Gertrudis and Red Angus, aimed at optimizing beef quality, fertility, and heat tolerance for 21st century ranchers. Utilizing data-driven selection and genomics, the ranch operates one of the world's most extensive cattle performance databases, with records on over 90,000 animals to guide its breeding decisions. The result is a continually improving herd that can thrive in harsh environments with lower costs. For example, King Ranch's Santa Gertrudis American Red cows sustain a 90% calf crop even in drought conditions while consuming significantly less feed than average. This relentless push for efficient, hardy cattle shows how King Ranch has adapted to modern beef industry pressures, such as rising feed costs and climate variability. Equally important, King Ranch has evolved its business philosophy. No longer simply a cattle outfit, it views itself as a resource management enterprise, balancing livestock, wildlife, and land stewardship. Fifth-generation family member Stephen T.O. Kleberg famously stated, "We no longer see ourselves in the cattle business as such. We are in the resource management business." This holistic approach has helped King Ranch stay profitable and sustainable in a changing world, proving that a ranch founded in the era of cowboys can reinvent itself for the modern era. Lasting impact on the beef industry. The influence of King Ranch on the broader beef industry is hard to overstate. From the late 19th century onward, practices pioneered on this ranch spread across Texas and the West, improving beef production nationwide. For example, King Ranch's early adoption of selective breeding and breed upgrading hastened the end of the Longhorn era and ushered in higher quality beef cattle across the region. Ranchers saw the success King Ranch had crossing Longhorns with Shorthorns and Herefords, and later Brahmins, and followed suit, replacing scrubby open-range cattle with superior beef breeds. In essence, King Ranch served as a proving ground for better beef genetics, to the benefit of the entire industry. The development of the Santa Gertrudis breed in particular had global ripple effects. As the first U.S. bred beef strain, Santa Gertrudis demonstrated that American ranchers could tailor cattle to their environment, a concept now common in breed programs. King Ranch sold Santa Gertrudis bulls and seed stock to ranches around the world starting in the 1930s, seeding herds from Florida to Brazil to Australia with its genetics. Beyond genetics, King Ranch drove changes in how cattle are raised and marketed. The ranch was a leader in shifting from the old model of open-range grazing and months-long trail drives to a modern ranching model with fenced ranges and direct transport to market. Captain King himself invested in infrastructure like railroads, stockyards, and packing plants in South Texas, aiming to streamline the journey from pasture to plate. This foresight helped integrate Texas ranches into the national beef supply chain after the Civil War, laying groundwork for today's vertically integrated beef industry. King Ranch's success also encouraged the proliferation of large-scale ranches. It proved that with good management, a ranch of 1 million acres could be run efficiently and profitably. By the mid-20th century, King Ranch even expanded beyond U.S. borders, acquiring or partnering on ranches in Argentina, Brazil, Cuba, Australia, and beyond. In doing so, it exported American ranching know-how and cattle worldwide, further amplifying its influence on global beef production. Modern-day King Ranch riders in traditional attire pause in front of the old Santa Gertrudis Ranch headquarters, established 1853. The King Ranch's image, from its famous Running W brand to its cowboy traditions, has become an icon of Western ranching culture. If King Ranch changed the business of ranching, it equally shaped the cultural image of ranching. The very phrase King Ranch evokes visions of sprawling plains, 10-gallon hats, and skilled cowboys on horseback. In fact, Richard King's practice of recruiting entire villages of Mexican vaqueros, the Caneños, or King's Men, to live and work on the ranch created a unique cowboy community that endures to this day. Generations of Caneños passed down vaquero horsemanship, roping skills, and a fierce loyalty to the ranch, embodying the classic American cowboy ethos on a grand scale. Stories of King Ranch's early days, from Captain King's daring cattle drives to Henrietta King's steadfast leadership after his death, entered Texas folklore and legend. By the time of Richard King's death in 1885, newspapers were already calling King Ranch one of the great tamers of the Texas range, and the ranch itself a symbol of the Old West's conquest. The Running W brand of King Ranch is perhaps the most famous ranch brand in the world. It became one of the most widely recognized marks in the history of the cattle industry, synonymous with quality livestock and frontier heritage. Even today, the King Ranch logo, a running W, is instantly recognizable and carries prestige. The ranch's cultural reach extends beyond agriculture. It has been featured or alluded to in novels and media. For example, James Michener's epic Centennial drew inspiration from King Ranch's story, and it has its own dedicated museum in Kingsville, Texas. The Ford Motor Company even partnered with King Ranch to create King Ranch editions of trucks and SUVs, available since 2001, which come with rich saddle leather interiors and the Running W logo proudly displayed. This successful branding speaks to King Ranch's outsized place in the American imagination. It represents a blend of ruggedness and luxury, tradition, and innovation. King Ranch has also contributed to American equestrian culture. The ranch's horse breeding program produced top-tier quarter horses, including Wimpy, AQHA registration number 1, and champion thoroughbreds. Most famously, Assault, the 1946 Triple Crown winner, bred and trained on King Ranch. This remarkable achievement of a ranch-bred horse winning the nation's highest racing honor further solidified King Ranch's legendary status. Whether in cowboy lore, sporting history, or popular branding, King Ranch stands as an icon of Western heritage. It embodies the romance of the Texas ranch, a legacy of longhorns and lariats, hardy cowboys, and big open skies. even as it has evolved into a modern enterprise. A legacy of innovation and conservation. Innovation has been a running theme in King Ranch's story, and it remains a core part of its legacy. Time and again, the ranch demonstrated a willingness to try new approaches and invest in research to improve ranching. We saw this in the 19th century with Richard King's push to improve cattle and build supporting infrastructure, and in the early 20th century with the creation of Santa Gertrudis. In the mid-20th century, under Bob Kleberg Jr. and his family, King Ranch continued to pioneer advancements. They introduced mechanized pasture management, developed new forage grasses, and designed more efficient cattle handling facilities to reduce stress on animals. The ranch also began one of the earliest wildlife conservation programs on a working cattle ranch. By the 1930s, King Ranch set aside habitat and managed wild game populations, understanding that healthy wildlife and cattle could coexist on the range. This was a progressive idea at a time when many saw ranching and wildlife as at odds. King Ranch's game conservation efforts became an industry-standard model that other ranches would later emulate. The establishment of the Caesar Kleberg Wildlife Research Institute, named after a King Ranch family member, and the King Ranch Institute for Ranch Management in later years further cemented the ranch's commitment to innovation in land and animal stewardship. These institutes, in partnership with Texas A&M University Kingsville, conduct research and education on sustainable ranching practices, ensuring that the spirit of innovation at King Ranch benefits the wider ranching community. Even in recent years, King Ranch has stayed on the cutting edge. It was reportedly the first ranch to use single-step genomic expected progeny difference (EPD) models, a state-of-the-art genetic tool, to accelerate improvement of its cattle by embracing DNA testing, data analytics, and precision breeding indices. The ranch keeps pushing the frontier of what's possible in beef production. The cumulative effect of these efforts is a ranch that continually produces better beef with fewer resources, aligning with society's growing expectations for sustainable agriculture. King Ranch's long-running motto could well be "Innovate or Perish," and its longevity is proof of how effectively it has innovated. As we move further into the 21st century, King Ranch stands as a bridge between the storied past of the Old West and the challenges of the future. The ranch's current stewards, all descendants of Captain King, are keenly aware of issues like sustainability, environmental change, and evolving consumer demands. In many ways, King Ranch is positioning itself to help lead the American beef industry into a new era, just as it did in the 1800s and 1900s. A core focus is on sustainable ranching practices. The ranch's management philosophy has long been to treat the land as a renewable resource to be nurtured for future generations. This means maintaining a balance between cattle stocking rates and the carrying capacity of the range, preserving native grasses, and continuing aggressive brush management to prevent habitat degradation. King Ranch's own environmental mission statement emphasizes ecosystem stewardship, aiming to keep the land productive for livestock, wildlife, other fauna, and the native range, all at once. This holistic approach, dating back to Richard King's appreciation of the land's wildlife, is now more important than ever as ranchers grapple with climate change and public scrutiny of environmental impacts. Importantly, King Ranch is actively involved in industry-wide efforts to address climate change and greenhouse gas emissions from cattle. The King Ranch Institute for Ranch Management and its researchers are exploring ways to achieve climate-neutral beef production. This includes studying methods to reduce methane emissions from cattle, such as through dietary adjustments and genetic selection, and improve carbon sequestration on ranch lands. By mitigating emissions and enhancing the land's natural carbon capture through healthy soils and vegetation, experts affiliated with King Ranch believe the beef industry can significantly reduce its net warming impact. The fact that King Ranch is part of these forward-looking initiatives speaks to its leadership role in guiding the beef industry toward environmental responsibility. On the ground, the ranch is also adapting to practical challenges like more frequent droughts and heat. The development of heat-resilient cattle breeds, Santa Gertrudis and American Red, is one direct response, ensuring cattle can thrive even as temperatures rise. King Ranch has also embraced modern tools. From remote sensing of range conditions to advanced animal health programs, to stay resilient and productive under changing conditions. What about the human element and the next generation? King Ranch remains a family-owned enterprise, now in the hands of the 5th and 6th generations of the King Kleberg family. This continuity means that a deep sense of legacy guides its future. The family's decision in the 1990s to keep the ranch intact, when some shareholders wanted to break it up, ensured that King Ranch would endure as a single entity. Looking forward, the ranch's leadership is focused on educating new ranch managers and cowboys in the King Ranch way, often through its internship programs and the Ranch Management Institute. In essence, King Ranch's future plans revolve around carrying its legacy of innovation, stewardship, and adaptability into the next century. The ranch that reinvented American beef once before is well poised to do so again, whether by breeding the cattle of tomorrow, pioneering sustainable grazing systems, or finding new ways to balance profit and conservation.